Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Radha Giridhari Bhagavan ki jai Jai Jagannath Baldev Subhadra Maya ki jai 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 Gaur Nitai ki jai Jai Shri Srila Prabhupada ki jai Gaur Prabhupada Hari Hari Bol
Hari Hari Bol. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Moving on, we'll continue from Srila Prabhupada's Leelamrita. We're reading the chapter A Resident of Vrindavan. So we'll just continue from where we left yesterday. The train arrived at Mathura. Abhay stepped down with his luggage and looked around, noting the recently constructed Mathura Junction building. Proceeding through the gate and out of the station, he found a tanga driver, agreed on the fare, and started for Keshi Ghat. For half a mile, the wobbling horse-drawn cart followed the road between the tracks and the railway yard. At the main road, they turned left, passing under a railroad bridge, and entered an open market. Piles of fruits, vegetables, and grains were displayed on the ground, the vendors sitting beside them, bartering and measuring while customers milled about. The women of Mathura, dressed in brightly colored saris, yellows, greens, pinks, and purples, moved busily in the market. The vehicular traffic consisted mostly of bullock carts, the drivers often squatting on the wooden yokes between the shoulders of their animals, whipping alternately one ox and then the other with a length of rope joined to a wooden handle. Although this was the most populated area in the trip to Vrindavan, compared to Delhi, it seemed simple and rural. The sun was high, but the tanga's top provided a partial shelter. The summer's heat had passed. Beyond the bazaar, the road curved to the right, and Abhay saw the nearby white domes of the massive sandstone mosque marking Krishna Janmasthan, the birthplace of Lord Krishna. Centuries ago, invading Muslims had destroyed the large Krishna temple and created the mosque in its stead. And now directly in front of the mosque stood a newer, smaller Krishna temple. They approached the three-way junction, New Delhi, Central Mathura, Vrindavan. The driver struck the horse with his whip and the tanga proceeded along the Vrindavan road, edging through a herd of white cows, the herdsman walking amongst them, carrying his stick. The road was busy with tangas and slow creaking ox carts, loaded with market commodities, and pulled by squat black water buffalo. A string of small spindle-legged donkeys carried oversized loads of firewood and sandbags. Although much had changed in Abhay's life since he had come here to see his spiritual master during the parikrama years ago, Vrindavan had remained the same. He felt he had done the best thing in coming here, leaving the heat, the traffic and fumes, the human passions of Delhi. It was a natural relief. Yet, even as he felt transcendental emotions for Vrindavan, impressions of his months of preaching in Delhi lingered in his mind. The city streets and himself going from place to place with his back to Godheads. Life in Delhi had been constant, vigorous preaching. Now he was more than 60 years old, but he was not coming to Vrindavan to retire. He had retired from household responsibilities, but not from his responsibilities of making back to Godhead as popular and sophisticated as illustrated weekly. He would live in Vrindavan and commute to Delhi, but he would never stop preaching. The sight of taller trees signaled the precincts of Vrindavan as the thin horse trotted along past the police station and water trough for animals. On either side appeared the garden courtyards of private estates and ashramas. Fragile white malati flowers, golden marigolds, frangipani trees, red hibiscus, trees of sorrow, and many other flowers and trees, some known only in Vrindavan, loomed forth in the brilliant sunlight. The Radha Govind temple loomed fortress-like on his left, and opposite in the distance, the high-rising tower of the Ranganath temple. They entered narrow streets, tighter and busier places with markets and city dwellings, and then it became quieter again. At the end of a narrow street by the Yamuna river, near the Keshi bathing ghat, stood the small and beautifully ornate entrance of the Vamshi Gopalji temple, a narrow 3-storied building with 3 domes and many decorated arches. After stepping over the curbside drain and walking up 3 marble steps, Abhay entered the front door, the driver following him, carrying the luggage. Once inside, Abhay removed his shoes and entered the courtyard, which was open to the sky through a metal grate, on which a few birds sat 2 floors above. A column of sunlight lit one side of the courtyard, where a potted Tulasi sat atop a pillar. The temple seemed cool and quiet. Adjacent to the courtyard was a deity room, its doors locked shut. Overhead was a mezzanine with rooms whose entrances were visible from the courtyard. A few saris and strips of cloth hung on improvised clotheslines. Should I stop there?
Okay, Mataji.
Okay. Prabhupada ki jai. So this description of Vrindavan we will find relevant even in today's class. Let's hold that in our minds and proceed. So as usual, before proceeding, we'll say the Mangalacharan prayers, invocation prayers. Om Ajnanati Nirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Vena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vishama Madhava Swaminiti Namne Gurum Gauram Girisheshtham Yo Vishrambhena Sevate Madhavam Tulasi Ramakrishna Kirti Karamstuve Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Shri Gurum Dina Taranam Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudire. Nashtaprayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Before continuing, we are acknowledging Srila Prabhupada for his greatest contributions, which are his books, all his wonderful books, without which I would not be able to say anything today. So Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, so many more. Thank you very much to Srila Prabhupada. Today we are, in fact, before continuing, I'd also like to thank all the devotees for giving me this opportunity to speak today. It's always been an honor and privilege to be part of this morning Bhagavatam class. And so thank you very much. Today I speak in order to purify myself. And if there are any mistakes, please forgive me and please correct me. So with that, we'll chant. We're reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 22, verse 21. Ritu Maharaj meets the four Kumaras. Shastreshva iyan eva sunishchito nirnam kshemasya sadhrigvimsheshu hetuhu asanga atma vyatirikta atmani dhridaratir brahmani nirgune chaya. Shastreshva iyan eva sunishchito nirnam kshemasya sadhrigvimsheshu hetuhu asanga atma vyatirikta atmani dhridaratir brahmani nirgune chaya. Shastreshva iyan eva sunishchito nirnam kshemasya sadhrigvimsheshu hetuhu asanga atma vyatirikta atmani dhridaratir brahmani nirgune chaya. Would anyone like to try reading this?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu, thank you.
Shastreshu iha nevoshunishita nidam shema shadriyam pimreshu hetu asangatma vatiriktatmani dridarati brahmani nirgune yaha. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I'm also trying.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Shastresha yanevo sunishchito niram khemasya sadhrigvimsheshu hetu asanga atma dhridaratir brahmani nirgune chaya. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Thank you, ma'am.
Shastresha sunishchito ninam shema shadrak vimrisheshu hetu asanga atma vyatirikta atmani dhridaratir brahmani nirgune chaya.
Thank you, Mataji. Should we move on to the synonyms? Would anyone like to say the synonyms? Or I could say it. Shastreshu, in the scriptures.
Shastreshu, in the scriptures.
Thank you.
Ian eva, this is only. Shunischita, positively Mrina, of human society. Yok, perfectly. Brimri Sheshu, by full consideration. Hetuhu, cause. Asangaha, detachment. Atma Betirikte, the bodily concept of life. Atmani, unto the supreme soul. Dridha, strong. Rati, attachment. Brahmoni, transcendental modes. Cha and Ya, which. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to read the translation?
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
It has been conclusively decided in the scripture, after due consideration, that the ultimate goal for the welfare of human society is detachment from the bodily concept of mind and increased and steadfast attachment for the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental, beyond the modes of material nature. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. I'll read the purport. Everyone in human society is engaged for the ultimate benefit of life, but persons who are in the bodily conception cannot achieve the ultimate goal, nor can they understand what it is. The ultimate goal of life is described in Bhagavad Gita 2.59, Param Drishtva Nivartate. When one finds out the supreme goal of life, he naturally becomes detached from the bodily concept. Here in this verse, the indication is that one has to steadfastly increase attachment for the transcendence, Brahmani, as confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra 1.1.1, Athato Brahma Jignasa. Without inquiry about the supreme or the transcendence, one cannot give up attachment for this material world. By the evolutionary process in 8.4 million species of life, one cannot understand the ultimate goal of life because in all those species of life, the bodily conception is very prominent. Athato Brahma Jignasa means that in order to get out of the bodily conception, one has to increase attachment to or inquiry about Brahman. Then he can be situated in the transcendental devotional service, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. To increase attachment for Brahman means to engage in devotional service. Those who are attached to the impersonal form of Brahman cannot remain attached for very long. Impersonalists, after rejecting this world as mithya or false, Jagan Mithya, come down again to this Jagan Mithya, although they take sannyas to increase their attachment for Brahman. Similarly, many yogis who are attached to the localized aspect of Brahman as Paramatma, great sages like Vishwamitra, also fall down as victims of women. Therefore, increased attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead is advised in all Shastras. That is the only way of detachment from material existence and is explained in Bhagavad Gita 2.59 as Param Drishtva Nivartate. One can cease material activities when he actually has a taste for devotional service. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also recommended love of Godhead as the ultimate goal of life. Prema Pramartho Mahan. Without increasing love of Godhead, one cannot achieve the perfectional stage of the transcendental position. The wonderful purport by Srila Prabhupada. Just look at some of the key points that Srila Prabhupada has mentioned in this verse. Actually, before that, we'll just go through the background. So we're reading Prithu Maharaj's story, which is one of the longest sections in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the longest is the Krishna Leela, Canto 10. Then we've got Canto 7, Prahlad Maharaj's story, and then Prithu Maharaj's story. In some ways, Prithu Maharaj's story is even longer than the Prahlad Maharaj's story. So the history thus far, we have seen the unique beginnings of Prithu Maharaj, how he came from the body of the evil King Vena, and how he was an exemplary administrator caring for his citizens' needs and providing for them. And then we see the exemplary character of Prithu Maharaj in the most provoking circumstances. So when his horse is stolen by the Lord Indra in his 100th Ashwamedha sacrifice, Maharaj Prithu, how he, following the advice of superiors, kept his calm and stopped hostilities, basically. And then he was, so perfect in his behavior, such an exemplary character that Lord Vishnu himself is, he's forced to appear. He appears himself there, and along with him, he brings Lord Indra, and King Prithu immediately forgives Lord Indra. And with this, Maitreya Muni is going to end the story of King Prithu. But Vidura is so curious to learn more about King Prithu that he tells him, please tell me more. And then Maitreya Muni continues. And then he says about a big yajna that is happening, and King Prithu Maharaj, he gives the citizens lots of wonderful instructions. So among the instructions, actually, he ends his instructions. He tells them to worship the Supreme Lord along with performing their occupational duties. And he's thankful to them that because of their good behavior, he is benefited. But he ends his instructions with the foremost instructions saying that you have to, the best Brahmanical culture is where when we worship and we respect Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. So he's ending his instructions with that, and the citizens have just reciprocated when the 4 Kumaras arrive. The 4 Kumaras appear there, and immediately we see King Prithu. He is following his own instructions. So he welcomes them very well. He practices what he preached. And that's what we see about King Prithu. There's 2 standout qualities about him. One is his humility, and the other is his integrity. So he says something and he follows that. He's instructing his citizens to welcome, to treat the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas very nicely. And that's what he's doing. When the four Kumaras arrive, he welcomes them very nicely and very humbly. He then poses two questions before them. After glorifying them, he asks two main questions. The first question he asks is that for those entangled in material life, can they, they're only working for sense gratification, can they still be blessed with any good fortune? The second question he asks is, how can one quickly achieve the ultimate goal of life? So now we will hear the Kumaras are, they've thanked him for these wonderful questions, and then they are going to begin their answers. That's where we are in today's verse. So in today's verse, also reading Srila Prabhupada's purport, there are a few main points that come out. One is that when they say the ultimate goal is detachment from the bodily concept of life and attachment to the Supreme Lord. And Srila Prabhupada in his purport emphasizes this verse from the Bhagavad Gita. It's 2.59, Param Drishtva Nivartate. Param Drishtva Nivartate. Let's just read this verse. It says, Vishaya Vinivartante. Niha, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, Mataji, you can see that.
Thank you. So Vishaya Vinivartante Niraharasya Dehinaha Rasavarjam Rasopyasya Param Drishtva Nivartate. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So he's talking about how we develop a higher taste. And without a higher taste, without seeing something higher, one cannot get detached from the bodily concept, from the material life. The other verse he also refers to in his purport is Athato Brahma Jignasa. He's quoting from Vedanta Sutra 1.1.1 that one has to develop curiosity, at least when you come to the human form of life, after going through the 8.4 million species of life, at least when you come to the human form, be curious, be inquisitive, want to know something more about what is beyond this material world, who is an actual spiritual person. And then he talks about bhakti. Bhakti is the way to develop this attachment for the Supreme. He says jnana and dhyana yoga, that is the path of impersonalism or the path of dhyana yoga. These are not the perfect ways to develop attachment for the Supreme Lord. The best way, the most recommended way, Srila Prabhupada says, is attachment is by bhakti, by following devotional service. And then he concludes his purport by saying Lord Chaitanya, he also said this, that to develop attachment to the Supreme, you have to develop love of Godhead, and prema is the ultimate goal. Love of Godhead is the ultimate goal. So just looking at these points, I thought we'll just look at a few things. We got to get detached from the material world, it says, as the ultimate goal, and to get attached to the Supreme. So, we heard yesterday from His Grace Himan Krishna Prabhu, how he was traveling along the East Coast, and he saw such beautiful scenes, so scenically wonderful this place is. And we in New Zealand, we are actually spoiled by such wonderful, beautiful scenery and places around us. And these are all, we can understand from the scriptures, these are all allurements of Maya. So Maya, or the material energy of the Lord, she's very powerful. She's very bewitching, and she entices us. She's got this attracting potency. We get so attracted by all the beautiful things we see around us. And at the same time, she's also got a kicking potency. So on the one hand, we get attracted to her, and on the other hand, we get kicked by her also. So just a few weeks back, we had been to Mount Cook, the South Island, and we saw the wonderful, beautiful, magnificent snow-capped mountains and the glaciers, the Tasman Glacier. It was so beautiful, so beautiful. We were enjoying all this in the company of friends, and we were enjoying the sub-zero temperatures. It was very nice. And we came back, and within 2 days, we were subject to, some severe accident and burns. And we had to be going to the hospital and things like that. So it was this agony of, suffering on the one hand and the beauty on the other hand. So this is Maya. on the one hand, she will attract you. And when you're cozy and comfortable and enjoying yourself, suddenly she'll give you a kick and you won't know where you've gone, where you've landed. So what is this Maya? So these are the 8 elements of Maya, which we already know of material nature. We've got earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. So each of them, they can give us a lot of pleasure. We benefit so much by all these elements. We've got earth, which can, with which we build so many things, and we can make so many constructions and so on. But this earth, when there's an earthquake, or when there's even something small, maybe you're just walking on the road and you might trip and fall on something and get hurt. So the earth can, it can provide us shelter and nourishment in some ways, and some ways it can also destroy us or harm us. Similarly, water, fire, air, we hear in the news that Canada, there's 1,000 wildfires going on at the moment. There's floods going on in India. All these things. So each of these things has the capacity to serve us or to hurt us. We also we know about the 3 kleshas, the adhyatmic, adhibautik, and adhidaivik kleshas that we all go through. Miseries of the mind, miseries of living entities around us, from living entities around us, and miseries caused by natural calamities. So all of these we undergo day in and day out. We are all faced with these. Now let's look at some other characteristics of the material world. We hear from scripture that that this world is a dark place. If not for the sun and the moon and the stars, it's only darkness. And we hear this even scientists. Scientists say that more than 90% of this universe is just dark. It's just dark space. It's completely black. And we know this shloka, the famous shloka from Aranyaka Upanishad. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgama. Oh Lord, take us away from the asat to the sat, take us from darkness to light. So this is what it is. This material world is mainly dark. It's a dark place, not very attractive actually. Without light, there's nothing really to keep us here. And then, of course, from the Bhagavad Gita, we hear how this material world is full of miseries and is temporary. Yeah, which is. Yes, please. Yes, please, Prabhu. Would you like to read it?
Yes, ma'am. Mamupeta punarjanma dukhalayam shashvatam napnuvanti mahatmana samsiddhi paramangata.
Prabhu, the meaning also.
After attaining me, the great who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection.
Thank you, Prabhu. So the Lord himself, of his creation, he says that it is dukhalayam and ashashvatam, that it is full of miseries and is temporary. Sometimes when you're undergoing misery, sometimes, we almost feel relieved that it is temporary. So it is that kind of world where you're almost grateful that it is temporary. What are the other things, other characteristics? Next verse from the Bhagavad Gita, 8.16. We hear that it is a place of repeated birth and death. So from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death takes place. But one who attains my abode, son of Mati, never takes birth again. So this material world is a place of repeated birth and death. You just enjoy, celebrate the birth, and then you're soon faced with death. So it's a repetition of the same thing again and again and again, which can't be very pleasant. And then another verse from the same chapter 8.19, where we see that it's also a place of repeated creation and annihilation. So again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they're all helplessly annihilated. So not only birth and death, there's also creation and destruction happening continuously, again and again and again, without a stop. What else can we say about the material world? We can say it's a place of the 3 gunas, the 3 ropes that bind us: goodness, passion, and ignorance. In that sense, it's a prison house. It's a place of bondage. On this verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which talks about this, it says, as long as one does not inquire. So actually this place is described, he says, let's read the last line of this verse. It says, Karmatmakam yena sharira bandha. We are all absorbed in material activities by which we are bound to this body. We are all bound in this material body and we can't escape from it. So it's actually a prison house. We are bound. If not this body, you get another body. You can't escape this repetition of being bound in a body because we are actually spirit souls. We are not actually this body, but we are trapped within this body. Another characteristic of the material world is this is a place of anxiety. Why is it a place of anxiety? Because we are accepting the temporary as permanent. Because we are all actually spiritual beings, we are permanent, we are eternal. But we are subject to this repeated birth and death, repeated creation and annihilation. And so it is out of character for us, out of nature. And so when we accept, but we want permanence. And so when you're seeking permanence in the temporary, what is not permanent, then we become anxious. And then we, of course, have birth, death, old age, and disease that are always tormenting us. Another thing about this material world is that by nature, because in this material world, everyone is after sense gratification. By nature, we have a tendency to sin. This we see in Lord Rishabhdeva's teachings to his sons. I won't go into it because it might take time, but it is a place where we tend to sin, even though we don't want to. Another big characteristic, again from Lord Rishabhdeva's teachings to his sons, there's another verse in the same set of verses, where Lord Rishabhadeva tells his sons that this is also a place of competition, competitiveness and envy. Because we're all after sense gratification, without fail, we all tend to compete with each other for the limited resources here. And there is envy between brother and brother. So it's a place of competitiveness and envy as well. Another thing about this place is that this is, I heard from one of the classes of Amrendra Prabhu. He was talking about this, that how the capacity to enjoy for every living entity is limited, but the potential for pain is unlimited. So, for example, you might want to enjoy a gulab jamun. How many can you enjoy? There's a limit. Don't have capacity to enjoy more than a certain amount. But if you have to suffer, the potential for suffering and pain is unlimited. All kinds of pain, the same organ of your body can cause you. And of course, now what to talk about the mind. Mind can cause you unlimited pain. And also, this is a place of disorder and chaos. Why is there disorder and chaos? Because there's no one center. Everyone considers their own self as the center of their universe. And so everyone's after doing their own thing. And therefore, naturally, there's disorder and chaos. And of course, we'll see, even if you leave things as it is for some time, they tend to degenerate, to go into entropy. To basically, if you leave a room closed, after some time you come back, there will be dust there. How did it come? You kept it clean. But that's the tendency of this world. And then this is all we can say about at all times, whether we are in Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Kali Yuga, at all times, these are the characteristics of the material world. It's temporary, it's a place of anxiety, it's, disorder, all of that is there. And then add to that, we are now in Kali Yuga. So what to talk about Kali Yuga complications? There's a tendency towards atheism. All the good qualities are deteriorating. All the bad qualities are on the rise. So it makes it even worse. So these are all the qualities of the material world we've seen. Now let's contrast it with the qualities of the spiritual world, okay, which we're supposed to develop attachment for. If we understand what is the spiritual world, maybe we will naturally develop a little bit more affinity to it. So let's look at some of the, now material world, we all have first-hand knowledge and experience. But spiritual world, we have to depend on the seers, on the realized people, on the Lord's words himself. We have to depend on their evidence. At least I can speak for myself, I have to depend on their evidence. So let's look at Bhagavad Gita 15.6, where he says that, would anyone like to read this verse, please?
Na tadvashyate shuriya, na shashanka na pavaka, yat tanti tadhama paramam mama.
Thank you, Prabhu. The translation as well, please.
That supreme abode of mind is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world.
Thank you, Prabhu. So it's naturally illuminated. It doesn't need sun or moon. The Lord's spiritual abode is naturally illuminated by his own bodily effulgence. And then, of course, we've got Brahma Samhita, description of Goloka Vrindavan, where Brahma is describing Chintamani Prakara Sadma Sukalpa Vriksha, Laksha Vriteshu Surabhir Abhipalayantam, Lakshmi Sahasrashata Sambhrama Sevyamanam, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami, Venum Kwanantam Aravinda Dalayataksham, Barhavatam Samasatambada Sundarangam, Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Description of the spiritual world, where Lord Govinda, he's described as playing on his flute with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. Description of the loveliness of Krishna. And then about his looks, he says, worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, around whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, whose 2 hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful 3-fold bending form of Shyam Sundara is eternally manifest. So all these beautiful descriptions from Brahma Samhita, describing the spiritual worlds, how beautiful it is to be there with Krishna. And all of this can attract us to go back there. Similarly, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we see there's a description of Vaikuntha, when the 4 Kumaras are going to the gates of Vaikuntha. Just before before they meet Jaya Vijaya, there's a description of Vaikuntha planets. Let's look at just some of the translations of some of the verses there. So it says in the Vaikuntha planets, all the presidents are similar in form to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They all engage in devotional service to the Lord without desires for sense gratification. It says in the Vaikuntha planets is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the original person and who can be understood through the Vedic literature. He's full of the uncontaminated mode of goodness, with no place for passion or ignorance. He contributes religious progress for the devotees. Further on, it says, in those Vaikuntha planets, there are many forests which are very auspicious. In those forests, the trees are desire trees. And in all seasons, they are filled with flowers and fruits, because everything in the Vaikuntha planets is spiritual and personal. See, in the Vaikuntha planets, the inhabitants fly in their airplanes, accompanied by their wives and consorts, and eternally sing of the character and activities of the Lord, which are always devoid of all inauspicious qualities. While singing the glories of the Lord, they deride in the presence of blossoming Madhavi flowers, which are fragrant and laden with honey, and so on and so forth. You see so much of description of beautiful trees, beautiful flowers, the birds, the bees, and all of them, there's no passion or ignorance. It's full of goodness and it's full of sweetness. That's a description of Vaikuntha and Goloka. And similarly, we see in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we see the Supreme Lord Chaitanya himself describing the opulence of sweetness of Lord Krishna in chapter 21. A very long chapter, that as well as the next and the next chapters, all of them. There's an episode where Lord Chaitanya is explaining or describing all of this to Sanatana Goswami. And they're all beautiful. When you read them, you get a sense of, oh, this is where you want to be. Let's just look at one of the verses from that set of verses, because it's quite long. We'll just look at one of them, which is very beautiful. This is, it says, would anyone like to read this verse? Can you see it?
Can't see.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Would anyone like to read it?
Maduram Maduram Vapurasya Vibhor Maduram Maduram Badanam Maduram Madhugandhi Mrida Smitam Itat Aho Maduram 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 Maduram. Everything is Maduram.
Yes. Can you read the translation, please, Prabhu?
Oh my Lord, the transcendental body of Krishna is very sweet, and his face even sweeter than his body, but his soft smile, which has the fragrance of honey, is sweeter still.
Yeah, so beautiful, isn't it? It's quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but originally composed by Bilvamangal Thakur in his Krishna Karnamrita. It's a beautiful, beautiful verse describing the sweetness of the Lord, his body, his face, and finally his beautiful smile. And similarly, there are other great poets who have so many songs sung by devotees. We know Madhurashtakam, Adhuram Madhuram, Madanam Madhuram. So describing all the sweetness of Vrindavan, of all Krishna and all his associates. Similarly, we see Chaurashtakam, again that we sing now in the month of Adhik Mas. So it's seeing how so charming and beautiful Lord Krishna is, that he steals away. He says, Shri Radhikaya Hridayascha Choram. He's stealing, Srimati Radharani's heart, and he steals away the sins of all those who surrender to him. And similarly, so when we hear this about the Lord stealing, his stealing pastimes, I'm just reminded, when we go to the temple and we see Lord Sri Radha Giridhari, before going to the temple, I'll make all these plans. Somebody's told me I should not just go and stand like a dumb fool in front of the Lord. I should say some prayers and glorification. So I'll plan so much to, prepare so many shlokas that when I go in front of the Lord, I must recite these shlokas for him. But when I go there and I'll see the Lord, he's so beautiful. They're so beautiful there that you get, your mind gets completely blown away. All your thoughts, all your plans are just blown away. You just simply staring at them and just happy to see them. And that's my personal experience from going to the temple and seeing the Lord. Similarly, there's so many other poems are there by the devotees. Kasturi Tilakam, describing the tilak on his forehead and the Kaustubh Mani on his chest, and the Nasagre Navamautikam, Paratale, Venum Kare Kankanam. So beautiful description of the Lord, his jewelry, his pastimes. There's enough and more information here for us to get captivated completely. And then we see that in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela, again in the same section of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we see that Lord Chaitanya is describing this place as a place of pure goodness. The spiritual world, there is neither the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance, nor a mixture of both. Nor is there adulterated goodness, the influence of time or Maya herself. Only the pure devotees of the Lord, who are worshipped both by demigods and by demons, reside in the spiritual world as the Lord's associates. So there's no modes of passion and goodness are completely absent. It's only the pure goodness that prevails there. So automatically, which means what? That there is no gunas there, no bondage. So we are not bound. We are liberated from the material body, liberated by these gunas. And what does it mean? Complete liberation from matter and the modes. When we are liberated, we are just spiritual soul. We are just ourselves. And we are free to act in our constitutional position. We are free to act in a position of servant of Krishna. So we are free to behave as we naturally want to behave. So it's a place of just Satchid Ananda. There's eternity, knowledge, and bliss, nothing else. And there's, of course, no time. There's no question of time. So there's no question of deterioration. Everything is ever increasing, ever enhanced. No deterioration, no getting worse. And no birth, no death, no old age, no disease. Consequently, there's no anxiety. And the other big characteristic is that everyone is voluntarily serving the Lord. They're full voluntary obedience to the Lord's will. So there's complete order. There's no chaos there. So these are all these wonderful qualities of the spiritual world. Yeah. Now, question is, we know all about the material world, how not so nice it is. And then the spiritual world, which is so wonderful, so wonderful. The question arises that, we know so much about both these worlds. At least, we can say outsiders, they don't know. But we as devotees, I know about the difference between these two worlds. Then question is, what is the difficulty? Why am I not more attached to the spiritual world? Why am I not more detached from the material world? So do you have any thoughts? Would anyone like to share?
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you
Hare
for the
Krishna,
very nice question you have placed. And in fact, in this material world, because we are existing in this material world, we are under the mode of Maya. So we have two forces acting simultaneously. One is towards serving the Lord, that is our eternal or the constitutional position. But the material, under the influence of the material nature, we are also trying to fulfill our own desire to enjoy without Krishna, independently. Of course, it is a quality of the Krishna. Krishna enjoys, and in a reflection, in a perverted way, we are trying to enjoy independently, which is not possible. So because of that, under that force, these two forces we have to balance and balancing, and it is always, Maya is so powerful, it is distracting us from that principle.
Maya is very powerful, that's right. Yes.
Hare Krishna Mataji, just to add to that,
yes,
as you say, Maya is more attractive, one is more alluring than the others. So the thing which we get test immediate, we get attracted to that. But the devotional service is a practice. You need to some work on it.
Yes.
It's freely available, and that is you have to attain. So there is such endeavor is there.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So which is free, we enjoy it most. Which is to be achieved, we take some labor to get it. We just ignore it for the time being. That's why.
Right. One is cheap, and the other one is a little bit, you have to put in some effort for it. So, yeah.
Cheap, easily available.
Cheap is easily, yeah.
We get attracted.
So, I just was reflecting on this, and I put down a few points. I thought, one is, I was thinking maybe past conditioning. We've been living in this material world, spent millions and millions of lives. We are used to behaving in a certain way. So we have to go against the tide, go against the usual way of behaving. And that is probably the thing. Our past conditioning is holding us back. And then watching others, you see, when you look around you, you'll see other people, they seem to be getting everything. They become the CEO, they become this, they become that, they're enjoying material energy like anything, and nothing seems to be happening to them. And especially with the social media now, people are projecting only all the good things that they're doing and that they're getting and they're achieving. And it kind of, you think, oh yeah, just a little bit of hard work. You just have to work hard, and then you'll get all these things, and you can enjoy forever. So it's kind of distracting us. Then another thing I thought was hoping against hope, that we want happiness, and this is the material world, so we're hoping against hope that despite any setbacks, things will always work out. Things will work out. I just have to put a little bit more effort. Then, of course, I can say lack of faith, maybe, lack of faith in the scriptures, because material world we are experiencing firsthand, but spiritual world, we have to depend on somebody else's word. And that unless we have faith that, yes, there is this spiritual world and there is Krishna and there's something more beautiful there, that might be holding me back. And finally, lack of surrender, that I may even hear it and I may have faith, but I'm not surrendered to the words of the acharyas. So that's also probably holding me back. So these were some of the thoughts I had. And of course, as you said, Maya is very, very strong, and we are very, very small and insignificant. And also that we have to put in work and endeavor to go past our conditioning. I just want to conclude with this verse I saw read in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Uddhav Geet comes. So I'll just read the translation because of lack of time. It's a very beautiful verse. It says, having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories, being disgusted with all material activities, knowing that all sense gratification leads only to misery, but still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment, my devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. Even though he is sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment, my devotee knows that all sense enjoyment leads to a miserable result, and he sincerely repents such activities. So I was just thinking, at least if I come to the stage of repenting sense gratificatory activities, knowing that they only lead to misery, then that will be a great achievement, and to some extent, Lord Krishna will be pleased. So with that, I'd like to end today's class. If anybody has anything to add or would like to correct anything, any mistakes I made, feel free. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavad Pranam. So beautiful. Engaging ourselves in the true picture, showing the true picture on TV, very clear how this material world and spiritual world are different. As we are discussing on the point, what is the difficulty? The difficulty is material world is we are living the same floor. So you can move from one room to other room very easily. But if you're staying on the top floor, you need a ladder. That ladder is at the faith. So once you have the faith, you ride on the ladder, you can go upstairs. So that is how it works. That's why I remember one of the advertisement Onida TV.
Yeah.
So they used to write, owner's pride, neighbor's envy.
Neighbors envy, yes.
It's nature. They have taken this from Bhagavad Gita. So because of this, yes, because we are always competitive. If you have 40-inch TV, I will always try, why not 50? So this goes on and on, and there is no limit for that. And because of this attraction and competitiveness and all the points you mentioned, we are suffering because it is cheaply available. It is within our control. But spiritual world connection is not in our hand. You need some support, and that support comes from the faith by the association of the devotee. That's why Srila Prabhupada has made such a beautiful institution of ISKCON. So helping the people in general so that come together and understand what is the difference between material world and spiritual. And they can shape their life according to and enjoy the bliss of the spiritual happiness. And that's how it was. And that's all from me. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was very nice. Thank you. Hare Krishna. If there's nothing else, we can end today's class. Pancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thanks to the assembled ladies.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.